Okay, so thanks a lot for inviting me over to speak. What I'm going to cover in the next 12 minutes, I will ask to cover what makes an Israeli startup different. I'll try and give the good and the bad from my own personal experience. It's on my own theories, it's a big disclaimer based on a small sample which is very biased. But I think given the size of the industry, it's a relevant biased sample. And as I said, I'll talk about the different things, not only the better, but some of them that are not as good in this industry. First, my own personal background to give you some perspective on what I'm doing here. Let's begin with the end. Right now, I'm EVP at Actimize. That's an Israeli company that was just acquired by Nice Systems, another Israeli company, one of the few acquisitions within the Israeli high-tech space for about $300 million. And to give you a feeling of Actimize, selling, it's now part of a public company, so roughly $50 to $60 million is just our own division within the company, working with 8 of the top 10 brokerage houses in the States, over 100 large institutions worldwide, protecting financial transactions. Before that, I was with RSA Security due to an acquisition that they did to a company I co-founded called Sayota. So that was 2 years ago. After 7 years since we built Sayota from '99, we sold it to RSA Security for $150 million. What Sayota did was online authentication. And what's interesting, given that it's an Israeli company, is that when we sold the company, we protected over 100 million Americans every time one of you logged into Bank of America or Chase or Washington Mutual or HSBC, we were protected and authenticated by that technology made in Israel. It was acquired by RSA, I joined RSA, and later on moved to Actimize. And before that, 6 years in the military, in the intelligence, doing software development, and I'll talk about how that impacts, I believe, dramatically the industry. So the first point of view that I want to share with you, and I try to have some interesting naming here, aggressively flexible or agile. And it's not something people choose, it's kind of our DNA, I think, as Israelis and as Israeli startups. And our unorganized is another name for that same discipline that we have in master. But I think it's a very, very important one for the success of the Israeli high-tech. When you start a company, whatever idea you had, whatever team you had in place, whatever market you targeted, it's probably the wrong one. And I don't know any company that did not make dramatic changes in its course, especially in the first few years. Israelis, based on my, again, very biased experience, but most Israeli firms and most Israeli founders and companies are better at being flexible and adaptive than their counterparts. And we can have a long discussion about why that is the reason, but it's definitely seen in the industry. I see it every day. It's a very good thing at the beginning. It doesn't help when you grow up. Israeli companies, and again, the vast majority of those I know, as we mature, as we grow up, we learn that yes, you do need a process when you do something. You do need to have a structure and an org chart, etc., etc., etc. So again, I think it's a major part of our DNA, a very effective one, a big reason for the success of Israeli companies, but it does impact the growth and the way the companies evolve over time. And every time we go through an acquisition of an Israeli company by a foreign company, you just see the difference. It's visible, it's there, and I've been acquired by an American company and an Israeli company, and there is a difference, and a big difference between the two. So that's point number one, I think a major point in the success of Israeli high-tech, and I think will continue being one. The second one, which I think is also important, I call it polite bluntness. And the reason for polite, because Israelis always say please, because I think it will change the fact that I'm not sure why, but it is the case. We are very blunt, and again, it's a very, very useful skill to have when you start a company. You need the feedback, you want to know the facts, you want to know if the product sucks. You need to ask it that way, because the average customer will be too polite. And that's the reality. So again, when you start a business, and we call it dugri, people call it chutzpah, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is when you start a business, you want to get the truth, and nothing but the truth, and the best way to do it is to ask for it directly. And we're pretty good at doing that, It doesn't work that well in some cultures. I can tell you that I was working with clients and partners, mid-country, down south. New York and California are much more receptive and understand this culture, but it is a very unique, I think, perspective and aspect of Israeli companies, and a pretty effective one, again, when you start a company and you want to know what's going on. It does do something else, which I think is very important. It creates a culture that everything can be put on the table and discussed and debated. Sometimes while screaming, and people from outside don't really get the fact it's a debate going on. But it is a healthy culture, and I think one that helps in the long run to the companies to survive and adjust and be flexible and so on. As I said, it can rub people in the wrong way, and when I interview people to my company, I ask them politely, but very aggressively, are you aware of what you're about to get into? It's not easy. It's not always fun. It is challenging. And once you get the right type of people, again, it's a very strong culture to have, and one that helps grow a company and make it a successful one. So that's point number 2. So it's the agility, the bluntness. The next one I wanted